Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. This episode is brought to you by The Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company shifting the way that women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional lab testing, and functional nutrition, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook. So you can stop guessing, start healing, and finally feel like yourself again. No more one size fits all protocols, just real answers, deep rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now, on to our show. Good afternoon or good morning, Hadley.
Hi.
Way ahead of you today, apparently. But I want to thank you for being on here. I think that it's going to be a really interesting conversation that I think really doesn't get talked about quite enough in our space, which is social drinking, sobriety, and all of the ins and outs that kind of go along with that. So Hadley is a mama to three boys. She's a lifelong runner, a sobriety advocate, an author, and she really preaches about changing the mindset and stigma around drinking for women. So I would love for you to just tell us a little bit more about who you are. And I'm sure I know there's a journey behind how you got into this work. So the floor
Yeah,
is yours.
absolutely. And if I had heard that introduction even just 5 years ago, I would have laughed and said, there's no way that you're talking about me, a sobriety advocate and an author talking about social drinking. It would have seemed so absurd to me. So like you said, I'm a mom of three boys, in the teenage space and beyond. I'm a lifelong runner, a marathoner. And after leaving my career in the corporate world many years ago, I actually became a fitness coach. Kind of embraced my love of fitness and helping women learn to sort of fall in love with exercise and take care of their bodies. And I poured myself into that for so many years and loved what I did. But I always felt a little bit, I guess, disingenuous. I think I started to feel this conflict as time went on, I was someone who I described myself as I was an enthusiastic social drinker my whole life, going back to when I was a teenager and first started drinking, which is terrifying to think of now, the age at which I started drinking. Now that I have, kids that
Right.
age. But it was kind of typical in my school, my area. Uh, and so I loved drinking. It was never about, I was never a daily drinker. I was never drinking in the morning. I was what we think of as a social drinker. I drank on Friday nights and Saturday nights, or in all of the situations where we think that drinking is so sort of normal and expected. Uh, but I never really felt good about it. And I hear this from so many other women when I start talking about it, I always felt like something about my drinking was just off. It wasn't about how much or how often, it was about how I felt when I did. I would binge drink because that's frankly what social drinking is a lot of times. And we think of it as so normal. And I had a tendency to black out, because that often goes along with binge drinking. But everybody laughed. Everybody thought it was normal. There were there didn't seem to be any red flags, because I could take breaks. I could only drink on the weekends. I could, all these kind of criteria that we think of, and we think, oh, well, I'm just a normal social drinker. So, anyways, fast forward to I'm a runner. I'm a fitness coach. I'm preaching about, women's health, and my whole sort of persona on social media was built around this idea that you can be really healthy and fit while also still loving wine. And I kind of talked about it in, like we were saying, it was like you can have that balance. You can be really healthy and fit. You can still enjoy your wine. Look, I do it. And I made all of the kind of classic mommy wine jokes about drinking and how necessary it was, and all of that. But things were kind of escalating, and even though I was really kind of drinking the same amount, I was just feeling worse and worse every time I did. It was like my hangovers were getting worse. The shame after a binge or a blackout, it was really having an impact on my mental health. And I was starting to feel like, I'm preaching about women's health and self-love and all of this stuff. And I really don't like myself a lot after I've been drinking. So I feel like I'm kind of full of crap here. And I don't feel very healthy. And it all kind of came to a head in the summer of 2021, and I had taken a few breaks. I was really finally kind of recognizing openly that something about my relationship with alcohol was off. And I finally woke up one morning that August, and I had the spins and the chills and kind of that classic 3 a.m. Hangover feeling. And I decided this is it. I am done. I'm so tired of doing this to myself over and over again, and always saying I was going to start fresh, or next week would be different, or I wouldn't drink at all, or making all these rules and breaking. I said, this is it. I'm done. I was so ready. And that was the last time I touched a drop of alcohol. And it's been a journey for almost 4 years for sure. Wasn't always easy. But I knew that it was the right thing to do for me. And it completely changed my life in so many ways, and ultimately opened up so many doors. I ended up writing a book that's kind of a memoir self-help book about alcohol and drinking. And there's so many books in that space, but I felt it was really important for somebody to tell the story from kind of the gray area drinker's perspective, as opposed to those more extreme kind of stereotypical addiction stories that are also so important. But I thought it would be nice to tell, to tell it from a different angle. So that's what's kind of led me here. It's been a wild ride, but so worth it.
Yeah. I think this space you said like gray area is so interesting because it is true, when people don't really understand the relationship with alcohol, it's always fine, right? And even I know yours was like blacking out, things like that, but people just, I mean, at least my client, drinking every night is a very normal thing. Having, a bunch of drinks on Friday or Saturday. And it's like, I feel as if a lot of it is like we're trying to not actually feel certain feelings and we're suppressing them with alcohol. And that can be a problem, not only metabolically that I see from my health perspective in a lot of clients' labs, but just like emotionally. It's like, what are you trying to hide from or, run from? Or why do you feel like you can't have fun if you don't drink it? You know what I mean? Are those kind of some of the topics that come up a lot with people when you're talking to them?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, so many we've been sort of sold this story that alcohol is a great way for women to manage stress, and if we're stressed, if we're worried, if we had a bad day, like all these reasons why we should have a drink. But the truth is that it's hurting us more than it's helping us, right? It's shown, one, when we're drinking to deal with those problems, like you said, we're not actually dealing with the problems. And secondly, alcohol is proven to exacerbate things like anxiety and depression, and has a very real impact on our mental health, not to mention all like the physical health components. So like I was finally noticing this mental health impact. It's like, well, of course the alcohol is not helping, and I'm feeling more anxious and more depressed and more stressed and all of these things. We're just sold so many lies about the jobs that alcohol does for us, and it's all BS.
Um, I'm kind of laughing because you had mentioned this earlier. We had talked before you started recording, or we started recording, but back in the day when my first platform, when I first launched my company, it was like my tagline was lose the 20 pounds while still drinking wine and eating pizza. And that's a tagline you see a lot on social media. And it drew a lot of clients in. I built a very successful company with that being but it just, like you said, like it's just like this pull of like misalignment and just realizing like, yeah, I mean, yes, you can see progress, but that progress is still like it was just about weight, right? It was just about like that number. And it was like there was so much more going on, not just physically, but emotionally, that is really being hindered. And while I don't personally preach 100%, zero alcohol on my platform now, it's still very much a conversation that comes up a lot with clients, especially who are dealing with harder to, with autoimmune, anxiety,
Yeah.
hormone gut, like a lot of people, it's like we don't realize how much it really does impact us.
Well, and I'm with you. I don't preach like global abstinence either. I don't think that everybody needs to stop drinking immediately. And, I'm not trying to reinstitute prohibition or anything like that. My husband still drinks. He is what you would think of as there's no perfect definition of what moderate drinking is
Yeah.
really. I mean, you'll see things online or whatever, but there's really no perfect definition. But I would very much describe my husband as a moderate drinker. I don't think that everybody needs to quit. I just think that if you are going to drink, you need to understand what it's doing to you and what it's, you know, really we're starting to learn so much more. The science around alcohol is changing and people are finally starting to open themselves to that message. Like we've heard recently the news that the Surgeon General is saying they want to put the cancer warning on alcohol, all of this. For so long we heard the message that red wine is good for your heart and all of this, and that's all been disproven, and prevailing science really shows that no amount of alcohol is safe or healthy. So people just need to understand how it's fitting into their life if they are drinking it. But really, alcohol and wellness don't belong in the same conversation, based on where the science has led. But that's a message that people aren't quite ready for yet.
Yeah, well, and I think that's just like anything, it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
That's usually one of the last things that people ditch. At least the clients we work with, right? It's one of the harder ones because there's not just the physical, there's an emotional tie to it too, right?
And a social,
And a
for
social
sure.
for sure. And that's a tough one. I try to give clients all of the tips on, what to do, but it's hard when you feel pressured, or
Mm-hmm.
people are like, you're changing. It's so we live in such a funny environment where it's like if you don't drink you're the weird one, right? And like,
Yes.
if you choose not to intoxicate yourself, it's like you're no fun, or you're changing. And that's hard because your identity shifts and sometimes your friend group shifts, and there's a lot that goes into it. So
Yeah.
something that
And we think that alcohol, we've been told that alcohol is the key to celebrating, to having fun, to connecting with your friends, all of these things. Well, and I can tell you now, almost 4 years sober, that that's actually not true. And I have a blast. I enjoy myself more. Everything, the fun that I have is more fulfilling and vibrant and all of these things. But it took me a long time to kind of get to that point because initially you think, oh gosh, I'm making this huge sacrifice. I'm missing out on something. So it takes a while to kind of recondition your brain to unlearn those things.
for sure, yeah, time. That's a hard one. I would be curious though if somebody is maybe open to exploring their relationship with alcohol.
Mhm.
And, maybe it's not like, okay, I'm gonna go cold turkey, but it's like, I really don't feel like this is serving me. Like, what would be some things to kind of help steer them in, the right direction to just maybe learning more about that relationship?
Honestly, what I tell people is if you feel like you need to explore your relationship with alcohol, if your gut is kind of telling you I need to like look into this, figure this out. Don't ignore it, right? Because if you're hearing that voice saying you should at least explore this, then you should. And don't feel like you have to go cold turkey and cut it out forever and all of that. But one of the first things I always tell people is start to educate yourself because that's the most powerful tool in your toolbox to help figure out like where you want to go next. If you really want to make a change, what you want that change to look like. There are so many books out there like mine, and and others. I mean, I probably read 15, we refer to them as sort of quit lit books, right? That cover the gamut of different experiences and the science behind alcohol and all of that. But it's so empowering to hear other people's stories, who made a change and what it meant for their life, but then also understanding the science and the statistics and what it's really doing to your body and your mind and all of that. I feel like that really helps you make a decision. And sober Instagram is a huge thing. That's kind of where I do most of my work now. There are so many amazing accounts out there that share that same message and help work people through it and kind of address, okay, if you're curious, these are things that you can do. So do some research, read some books, listen to some sobriety podcasts, but really arm yourself with information and it'll help you figure things out.
Yeah. And I feel like a little tidbit too is look at who you're doing it with and if those people are really serving you. Um, I think that's probably another one too, that's harder to look at. I feel like it's a little easier to be like, look at myself, but then when it's like, oh, but these are my friends, and it's like, are you friends because of what you're doing? Or are you friends because of an emotional connection and what, or is it just because you like to?
Yeah. And there were friends, what I kind of went through was what you said and went, okay, are these friends, are these people who are still going to want to be friends with me if I quit drinking? And for the most part, the answer was yes. And while there may have been some sort of shifts, and it took people a while to be like, "Oh, she's serious about this," right? But there were only very few relationships that really sort of changed or fizzled out. And to be honest, that needed to happen anyways, right? So
For sure. Well, I like what you said too, and this is something I actually it kind of stand by is, you don't have to go cold turkey, right? It's just like, hey, we start whittling it down. How is it making you feel? Do you feel better? Are you sleeping better? Do you notice the physical things? Do the emotional things that are happening? I know for me, when I decided to kind of cut back on alcohol, for me, it was more of an autoimmune journey, but it was like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm just gonna cut it out. I do love a nice Napa Red, if I do say so myself occasionally. But it was like, then I realized like when I did drink it, it didn't actually make me feel good. So it's like I don't really drink anymore. And I just feel better that way. It's the way but I like what you said too, is like my husband still drinks. I still go to parties, still go to bar. It's like it doesn't necessarily mean if you cut that out, it's like you have to tell everybody no, or you're gonna shame people that like it's just like that's a personal decision.
yeah.
But
Well, and you raised a good point. This is something I tell people too. A lot of people will say things like, oh, I need to take a break, or I think I need to change my drinking. And then they do something like dry January or dry July or one of those challenges, which I think can be really fantastic kind of gateways to exploring your relationship with alcohol. But the caution, the sort of cautionary tale there is if you go into that break saying, oh, I can't drink for July. This is awful. I have to power through this month. And then on August 1st, I'm going to have a margarita, then it's pointless. But if you use that month to really look inward, think about your relationship with alcohol, look at the situations, the social situations, the daily thing, how would I feel if I was drinking right now versus how do I feel now? Maybe you journal, maybe for me, it was those like Saturday or Sunday mornings with a hangover when I was ashamed and embarrassed because maybe I blacked out and I couldn't remember what happened. And I was trying to retrace my steps and all of that. And I was miserable. But keep track of all of those things and really think about how you feel without it. And make the most of that time to really help you decide where you want to go next. Don't just push through with the goal of having a big old cocktail as soon as the month's over.
yeah, I see that a lot with, people, I'm going to do Whole 30, right? Or I'm going to do dry January. And it's it's a double-edged sword because yes, I do think like I've had some clients that have like, wow, like that really opened my eyes to a lot of things, but others it's just like there's no coping skills. It's just like I'm only doing this because it's January. It's like, well, okay. But
Right.
then come February 1, they go and have like a party and down a bunch of margs or whatever, which is okay. But yeah, it's not really. teaching you anything,
Yeah.
not that it's a
Yeah. And if you are doing all that work and really being mindful and thinking about it through the month, and you decide to have a drink on February 1st or August, whatever it is, then that's fine. But if you're literally just ticking off the days so you can get to that drink, then you're not really accomplishing much.
yeah, for sure. Um, if you could give somebody just like say a woman's in this situation and what would be kind of the main takeaway that you would want them to kind of leave this conversation with that would be helpful?
Well, I would say, so many of us have been conditioned to believe that there's only two types of people. You're either an alcoholic or you're fine. And because that's the message we've already received, we think, well, I don't tick all those boxes on the alcoholic, am I an alcoholic online checklist? So that means I'm fine.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it's not black and white. Alcohol use disorder, the term alcoholic isn't even a technical diagnosis, right? It's alcohol use disorder is like the scientific term that is used. And by nature, it occurs on a spectrum ranging from mild to severe. So it's important to kind of reframe how we think about that. And I think so many women that I hear from get caught up in that idea that I'm not this, so I must be this, and therefore I shouldn't do anything. If your intuition is suggesting that alcohol is creating problems in your life, listen to it and explore it. Don't worry about whether you fit in one bucket or the other. There are no buckets. Like everybody falls somewhere on this range. And this concept of gray area drinking is so helpful because it's encouraging women who might have otherwise never raised their hand and said, okay, I think I need to consider this a little bit. It's giving them space to say, okay, maybe this is something that I need to adjust or think about changing, instead of just being stuck in this miserable kind of drinking hamster wheel like I was on for so long. So listen to your intuition. Don't worry about what bucket you fall into. You don't have to be one extreme or the other. Most drinkers, like social drinker, I mean, a lot of people fall somewhere on that spectrum. And we've got to kind of erase the stigma around that because alcohol's an addictive, one of the most addictive drugs. It's literally doing its job. So we shouldn't act surprised when it's problematic.
Sure. Well, where can people connect with you if they want to connect with you or find your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spend a lot of time on Instagram. I'm just at Hadley_Sorensen. I love being part of the sobriety community out there and kind of sharing what I've learned with people in the space who are looking to maybe make a change. My website is hadleysorensen.com. You can find my book is called The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking, Everything in Moderation and Other BS, and it's available on Amazon. So that's where you can find me. I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here and taking the time. If you guys found this helpful, I'm sure Hadley would love to hear from you.
Yeah,
Or we always love when things kind of hit home for you guys. Or leave a review is always helpful as well, so other people can hear this message as well. But otherwise, Hadley, thank you so much for being here, and thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you guys on the next show.
thanks for having me.